Behind the Curve TV show, Flat Earth. A 15 degree per hour drift detected and ignored or explained away, failing to do so. And another experiment with light trying to duplicate similar effects to being near a flat river, because that's nearly some sort of talisman for flatness, and showing curvature anyway by Geranianism. But let's talk about the 15 degree per hour rotation. If you take 15 degrees and multiply it by 24, you get around 360 degrees, right? Okay. So, at a particular moment in this documentary, a specific flat earther named Bob says, if the Earth is spinning at one rotation every 24 hours, that means that every hour it has to turn 15 degrees. In today's 21st century navigation systems, they are using what is called a ring laser gyroscope. It is extremely precise, and at this point he should have stopped, because not only does it have precision, it has accuracy, and you can tinker with it and try to change its behavior to see if you can remove that rotation, because you want to remove it so it doesn't get the numbers wrong, or the numbers in a way that aren't useful to you. And it's used, again, for navigation systems and aircraft especially. It's extremely precise. One of the people in our community actually purchased one for $20,000. And when we turned it on, the gyroscope, we found that we were picking up a drift, a 15 degree per hour drift. Now, at this point, you stop, because that is what you expect with the Earth not being stationary, reference to the arbitrary stationariness of the universe. One of the ways to detect that the Earth is stationary versus non-stationary is to do this, and also several other experiments. For instance, with the rotation of the Earth only being once a day, it's not going to have any throw you off into the distance effect, but it is technically a measurable effect by experimentation, by checking whether or not the rotation of the Earth changes how much something weighs relative to gravity, by using a 1 kilogram or whatever weight, and then measuring it very, very precisely, down to tiny bits of a degree, or tiny bits, thousandths of a gram of weight. That can be done as well. So you can detect not only is the Earth rotating with reference to some arbitrary point, it's also rotating with reference to its own gravity, because the closer you get to the North Pole, the less rotational force can be applied. At the equator, it should be maximized. But let's go on. When we turn on the gyroscope, we picked up a drift of 15 degrees per hour. And then he says this: we obviously were not willing to accept that. And so we started to look for ways to disprove that it was actually registering the motion of the Earth. And they decided they were going to cheat and say it was a rotation of the sky being picked up by the machine, and that the Earth has to be a fixed, flat object. Making it fixed and flat doesn't really work very well, because a spinning object can be a flat Earth because it can spin itself out flat. But by demanding the enormous Herculean effort of deciding that the Earth has to be flat, not rotating to maintain that flat shape, or making it somewhat flat, you take away the ability for this to even be something you can probably test for. So he decided it was registering the motion of the sky. Now, in the video, you can... The people who did this documentary made sure that he knew, we are going to film you at all times, and basically told him, don't say something you don't want people to hear. He was talking to other flat earthers, the unwanted findings, because it did actually show an anomaly. Now, an anomaly is an anomaly because it shows some rotation when you think it's flat, and you can zero it out. But if it shows exactly 15 fucking degrees of rotations per hour, and you keep finding it, that's not an anomaly, that's a consistent response. At that point, you take it further north or further south, take an airplane flight, and turn it on with a blanked memory if it has one, and you make sure that you test for this. Did it give you a consistent set of responses? Yes. Then make note of it and shut up. We don't want to blow this. When you've got a $20,000 in a freaking gyro, if we dumped what we found right now, it would be bad. You mean if you acknowledged the results were consistent, and always the same direction? He didn't even mention that. Obviously it was the correct direction, obviously it was the correct orientation, and it was detecting 15 degrees per hour rotation. Divide an hour by 15 degrees. That's 4 degrees a minute. Right? Something like that? No. It's 4 minutes per degree? What is it? You did the math. I'm going to also give an example of me doing very bad math in a minute. I made a mistake doing the calculation of the shape of the Earth. I know I did. I wanted to do it simple and dumb way. And I fucked up. But let's go on. Here we go. What I just told you was confidential. Now, the guy said this out loud, and you could see him looking around. Obviously, they had a camera pointed in his general direction. Now, the first thing that happens when the Globebuster leader of this organization did this video is the claims came out. He's a shill. He's just trolling them. He obviously didn't mean to say that. But the trouble with this is this screams at the top of its lungs. I dare you to point out I just told everybody to hide a result that contradicts our beliefs. He's doing that on purpose. That will further make more zealots amplify their behavior because they now have to fight the results from a fellow flat earther, and it will also kind of clear the chaff of people who are just barely believers so he can get more zealotry out of it. He wins. This is like defiantly telling people to ignore what's behind the curtain. So anyway, what else did he say? Globebusters uploaded a 4-hour-long flat Earth video that only addressed this at the 2.5-hour mark. Why? Because the video was titled about that 15 degree per hour rotation, which means he gets the page views because someone had to sit through it, and it's the top comment pointing out, okay, he starts talking about it 2 hours in, 2.5 hours in. Someone should upload a heavily edited version of it where it just gets to the point. Does he actually get to the point? You decide. You just have to type in about that 15 degree per hour rotation, Globebusters, flat Earth. And you'll find this video. Because I can stick in Geraniism's name and also this guy's name. We're at the 7 minute and 18 second mark. I'm now going to explain a few things here. But anyway, he later went on to blame heavenly energies. You mean the ether? He decided to encase the gyroscope in various things to give the same result every time. No matter what you did to exclude it, it gave the same thing. He wanted to use this to prove the extremely consistent anomaly was an anomaly and not a consistent result that you had to stop ignoring. Since then, he's gone out of his way to not just make a really short video like that. I'm not wasting your time here. So let's get on with this. How does this thing work? I should point out another flat earther posted this little gem. This is on a forum. A ring laser gyroscope can detect both physical Coriolis effect on light beams proportional to the area of the interferometer. Okay? And also can detect electromagnetic Sagnac effect that's proportional to the radius of rotation that is 21,000 times greater than this Coriolis effect. Now what does that mean? Anyway, his conclusion is the machine has to ignore Sagnac, otherwise it would show a rotation. Okay, so the Coriolis effect is actually the effect. Go look it up. Okay. And by the way, it affects the way planets orbit and rotate on their axes, and it's very counterintuitive because, yeah, that's something you might want to look into. But someone's claiming that it's 21,000 times more intense of a Coriolis effect, and that's the one you're supposed to use to figure out if the Earth is rotating. But he said it had to be ignoring it, otherwise we wouldn't be able to fly planes. When a ring interferometer is at rest with respect to a non-rotating framework. Now, rotation isn't relative as you might think. Yes, it is. But it isn't relative in many ways you can test. You can test to see if something's rotating if it has a throw-out bearing effect where it throws things away due to centripetal force. If you're not rotating relative to everything else in the universe, by literally being able to stare at a star, you actually detect a difference versus when you're rotating, just like we see the Earth rotating on its axis, respect to the star background. No, stars millions of miles away, or even hundreds of miles away, aren't whizzing around the Earth at super speed. No. But anyway, light takes the same amount of time to traverse a ring in either direction. only if it's not rotating. That's all it's testing for. Well, it can technically test for other things, but that's much more difficult. But this is supposed to isolate everything out, so it's literally just testing, is it rotating? That's it. When the interferometer system is spun or rotates at all, one beam of light has a longer path to travel than the other in order to complete one circuit of the mechanical frame, and so it takes longer, and you get a resulting phase difference. If you pick a light frequency or infrared frequency or blue, red, whatever, it will have the light patterns, because you use the same light source, interfering with each other, and you use a laser to keep them very consistent. They don't have to be perfect, it just has to show you rotation. And if you have a reference point to work with, well, it can be keyed that way. They set it up to look for that, okay, and then flip it upside down. Does it show the same rotation the wrong direction? Then it's at 0. That's why he bought it. Well, it can detect if it's upside down. Look for anything that detects gravitational pull and disconnect it. It has to work either direction, so it shouldn't consider that. But okay, you can do that. You can also build one of these. The light interferometer effect actually has an effect that is visible on the macroscopic scale, but you want to use a microscope. So anyway, this phase difference between the two beams is what you use, and it's a very, very testable thing. It's very consistent. This arrangement is called a Sagnet interferometer. George Sagnet set this up as an experiment in the past to disprove Einstein's theory of special relativity, because he had discarded the ether idea. Because he said there has to be an ether background. He wanted one. Just like the heavenly energies that we're talking about here. And what happened is, George Sagnet actually disproved his own belief by actually building a piece of equipment to test this. And it's ended up making a much better gyroscope. And again, the way you test a gyroscope is you turn the damn thing exit. You can get two of them, put them at a right angle to each other, $20,000 each, and test them. If you turn it upside down and it shows a negative number that's exactly 15 or very, very close to it, you can figure out how much deviation or bias it has. Unless you decide light intelligently is trying to lie to you because God wants to fool you into believing the earth is rotating so that you can defy, apparently, the will of God. This is my favorite quote. And this was a quote deliberately stuck in by somebody who's obviously figuring out that this is horse shit. I don't see how even zetetically the observation and experience of all these successfully navigated flights based upon this technology and calculations is somehow has to still be wrong. We're not getting plane crashes. We're not getting people thrown off axis. The navigation works, but it only works if you take into account the Earth rotating and it being not flat. The whole idea with Zetic astronomy and Zetic method is that you're supposed to accept the results regardless of your beliefs, and this guy, along with others, keeps making the same assertion over and over again. I refuse to pay attention to anything that disagrees with my presumption, and in this case, making views on YouTube and creating controversy in a TV show that probably paid him money, and deliberately separating the wheat from the chaff, the sheeple from the wolves, so they can keep the sheeple following him, just like all of you. I want to point out Geraniism did a simple light test that it was flawed, but it did actually show him that he's simply wrong about some absolute truth of a flat earth. The whole point is, does this show that you're just not completely correct? Okay, well then what's the answer? That's all you have to do. If you can't even make that little baby step, no one has to respect your opinion. Last minute of the video. There's a video where somebody used a bicycle in a long hunk of road and did a calculation of the shape of the earth. And I was off by a factor of 2 to 1 because I made a math error. But it was exactly 2 to 1. Pretty good. You see, that error tells me I used the diameter instead of the radius of the earth, which is exactly 2 to 1. See, you learn from your mistakes. If you don't, you keep making them.